A 37-year-old businesswoman disappeared while visiting Yosemite National Park after stepping away from her car near Bridalveil Creek for what should have been a brief stop. When she didn't return, a large search effort began and did not produce any leads. It wasn't until several months later that anyone got answers, but one question still remains today. What happened that day at the Overlook? Welcome to Morbid Outdoors, the podcast that ventures deep into the shadows of the wild. Here, we unravel the mysteries of missing persons, explore spine chilling legends, and share the most morbid stories that nature has to offer. From the depths of the dense forests to the highest mountain peaks, we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the great outdoors. Join us as we navigate the eerie, the unexplained, and the terrifying. So if you dare, grab your gear and let's embark on a journey into the unknown. This is Morbid Outdoors. Hello, everyone. My name is Elise, and I'm your host. Thanks so much for joining in today. I appreciate it. I hope you guys are having a great week, and I hope you have a great weekend. So, I again, like some of you have said, like I love the more relaxed feel of the show. I appreciate that, and I'm still gonna keep going with that. So, if I mess up, I'm not really gonna edit it out. So, you guys are gonna have to be okay with that. So, personally, I've never been to Yosemite National Park. I lived like 5 hours away for a year, and I was scheduled to go, and then I literally broke my left foot like 2 days before the trip, so I had to cancel it, because I didn't wanna go to Yosemite and then not be able to hike. So yeah, I want to go back. I've never been. I wanna go for the first time, and, it might be on my list for, like, later this year. I don't know. I'm either looking at, like, fall break, so, like, late October, or next year, like spring break, like early April. So if you've ever gone during one of those times, I would love to hear your feedback. I've read things online and people say different things, but it's also a lot of blogs that, they're getting paid to, oh, you should come during this time and yada yada. But I want to know really if you've gone, which you would you prefer? I want to see the waterfalls flowing. So I think October might be good, but I also think early April could be okay, but I also don't wanna deal with a lot of snow. So a lot of decisions. I definitely do not wanna go in the summer, at least the first time, because I don't wanna deal with as many crowds. So, we're gonna start with some negative reviews about Yosemite. Someone said, all the hikes are uphill and you're practically climbing cliffs. I got soaked by several incredibly large waterfalls just by standing at the bottom of them. I wasn't told that I could take the cable car to the top of the mountains until after I left the park. Interesting. Someone else said, 5 stars for beauty, 1 star for safety. And I'm not talking about climbing rocks. That's for the crazies. I'm a normal person talking about the roads. The ones we have to drive to get through the park with 1,000 feet sheer rock cliff drop offs and no guardrail or even a curb. Three explanation marks. Exclamation marks. I'm gonna piss someone off that I messed that up. Seriously, this is our federal government trying to kill people here. Are they trying to kill people here? It was no doubt the scariest drive I've ever taken and would never do it again. And to this person, I say, have you driven in any other national park? Or even not on national parks, there are some very sketchy roads, like the Million Dollar Highway in Colorado freaks a lot of people out. I drove it during a blizzard, couldn't really see. It also had no guardrails, like, just go slower and take your time. Um, Someone else said, just know that the warnings within the park are focused on bear safety, but they don't seem to care about your safety, which I think is hilarious. Someone else said, don't believe the false information they have posted. They claim to be 24 hours, but I went through at 2 a.m. and couldn't see a thing. No lights or anything were turned on, just terrible. And as always, I just wanna tell you all, be proactive and use the internet when you're planning your trips. If you can use the internet to leave a bad review, you can use it to research your trip more. So, I don't know, when you go to a national park, you have to do a lot of planning and preparing, and especially if you have certain things you wanna see or do, it takes a lot of preparation. I actually just this morning made a reservation, the last reservation for my road trip this summer that I'm going on with my mom. We had a road trip around the Southwest planned for March of 2020, and you guys all know how that went. So that got canceled, and we're finally just now able to do it. And I'm excited, but like months ago, I was online on rec.gov making reservations, getting backcountry permits. You have to plan accordingly if you wanna see certain things and do certain things, and that's not even just in a national park. Even national monuments and national preserves are the same way. So, that's my tip to you. If you wanna travel this summer and have a good time, do some research. So, let's talk about Yosemite. Now I've talked about Yosemite before, but it's been a while, and so I'm not gonna go over everything, but just a little bit. So, Yosemite was established on October 1st, 1890. It's 759,000 acres, and in 2023, it had over 3 million visitors. It is very, very popular, and it is very beautiful from what everyone says. It was designated a World Heritage Site in 1984, and it's internationally recognized for its granite cliffs, waterfalls, clear streams, groves of giant sequoias, lakes, mountains, meadows, glaciers, and the biological diversity. Almost 95% of the park is designated as wilderness. So I'm sure many of you know, but indigenous people, let me move my mic. Indigenous people actually lived in where the park was established. And the indigenous natives of Yosemite called themselves Awanichi, meaning dwellers in Awani. Now, these people were the only tribes that lived within the park boundaries, but other tribes lived in surrounding areas. There were still indigenous people living within the park until 1969 when the government made them move onto nearby reservations. That is just so wild to me because I don't think that's really taught that that was still happening like pretty as of pretty recently, 1969. So let's talk about the landscape. This park contains thousands of lakes and ponds, over 1,600 miles of streams, 800 miles of hiking trails, and only 350 miles of roads. There are two federally designated wild and scenic rivers, and it's just a really vast place with a lot to see and do, especially if you're into rock climbing and hiking. So, Yosemite Valley, which is the very popular area of it, represents only 1% of the park area. Some notable, sites in Yosemite include Tunnel View, El Capitan, Half Dome, Sentinel Dome, and it's just like I've never been, I'm just telling you about what I know from online. It looks amazing. Now, the park contains dozens of other granite domes in addition to Half and Sentinel. Yosemite is also famous for its high concentration of waterfalls in a small area. It has the most famous, I think, is Yosemite Falls, and it's the fourth tallest waterfall in North America at 2,425 feet or 739 meters. Now, this is according to the World Waterfall Database. Yosemite has a Mediterranean climate, meaning most precipitation falls during the mild winter, and other seasons are nearly dry. There are a lot of flora and fauna in Yosemite, and some of the larger animals I wanna talk about are, like, cougar, bobcats, black bears. There are no grizzlies anymore, there used to be, but there are no more anymore. So, we are talking about someone that went missing and then was discovered deceased, and animal attacks are always going to be on the table when we're talking about these things that happen in the wilderness. So, I just wanna bring up, like, yeah, black bear, cougar, and, I mean, you know what I'm trying to say, I can't talk. Basically, the biggest animals that are predators in this area are black bear and cougars. And specifically, we are talking about the Glacier Point Overlook. Now, this is a viewpoint above Yosemite Valley. It's located on the south wall of Yosemite Valley at an elevation of 7,214 feet or 2,199 meters. It's a very popular overview because it has several views of Yosemite National Park's well known landmarks, including Yosemite Valley, Yosemite Falls, Half Dome, Vernal Falls, Nevada Falls, and Clouds Rest. And between 1872 and 1968, it was the site of the Yosemite Firefall. In the late 1800s, the first formal trail to Glacier Point was constructed. It was a steep, rugged path it became known as 4 Mile Trail. It was completed in 1872, and so it allowed visitors to hike to the summit for sweeping views of the Yosemite Valley. This is still a trail that you can still hike on today, actually. I've heard really good things about it, and this would be one that's on my list for sure. Before there was a road, you could only get to this area by hiking. Glacier Point can be reached from the valley via the Glacier Point Road. During the summer, Glacier Point is often crowded with tourists. Tours by bus are also available and take about 4 hours. The road is open from June through October, and in the winter, Glacier Point Road is closed due to snow, so access to Glacier Point is only available to be completed by ski or snowshoe from the Badger Ski Pass area. So if you want to hike in this area to get to Glacier Point, you would take 4 Mile Trail. It ascends 3,200 feet or 980 meters in 4.6 miles or 7.4 kilometers. This moderate to strenuous trail can provide access to Glacier Point when the road is closed. And I think a ton of people do that. Like they even go after the snow's been mostly melted off, but the road's still not open yet. You can still access national park areas by hiking or biking, and hiking in this case. So let's get into today's case. This one is a very strange one, and I think we are going to discuss Occam's razor towards the end of the episode, but it's just a very interesting case. I think it's not as popular as what it should be. I'd never heard of it until I saw it online. Like, I haven't heard of it on other podcasts. So let's dive into it. Okay, so on the afternoon of July 9th, 1995, a 37-year-old Massachusetts businesswoman named Jeannie Heschel Schwert was driving from Fresno to Yosemite National Park with her boyfriend, Mike Monahan. Now, they were not like new to each other or anything like that because they'd actually lived together in Arlington, Massachusetts for over 10 years. The couple took Highway 41 and arrived in Yosemite just after 10 a.m. They traveled on Glacier Point Road, a highway which is quite desolate. There were only a few cars, and like I said earlier, it's only open during the summer. So, back in 95, it's still going to be crowded in Yosemite, but not nearly as crowded as what it is today. So, think of Yosemite, what it would have been like in the 90s and not today. Now, they were actually driving towards Glacier Point, and they pulled over at a turnout near Summit Meadow, and they decided to take separate short walks and agreed to meet back at the car. This is odd to me, and I have some theories about it, but they set off in different directions. Mike had binoculars, and he went ahead to an overlook where he thought he would do some bird watching. Jeannie was wearing leather hiking boots, a t-shirt, and walking shorts. She was not carrying a backpack or any supplies. And 15 minutes later, Mike returned to the car, but Jeannie was nowhere to be seen. Like she wasn't there. It had been 15 minutes. He's he's concerned. So he started asking other tourists in the area and a park employee emptying bins nearby if they'd seen Jeannie, but no one recalled seeing a woman who matched her description. Now, some people online think that they split up because maybe Jeannie needed to use the bathroom. Maybe they both needed to use the bathroom, and so they split up. Personally, if I'm in the wilderness with my husband and I need to go, like, I don't like, like you've been living with this person for 10 years. You might not be married, but you're very familiar with each other. And I I just I don't know. I'm like, if I needed to pee or something, I wouldn't care if my husband was nearby, but maybe Jeannie needed some privacy, and so she went to go use the bathroom, and Mike was like, "I'll just bird watch and wait for you." That's the theory that I've seen online. So Mike waited and he continued searching the area around the car and around the overlook, but he didn't see Jeannie and no one else had either. So at around 12:30 p.m., Mike drove to the to get the park rangers, who were based a short drive down the road, and they started searching within 45 minutes. And within 2 hours, a helicopter was also in the air, and the following day, 8 teams of sniffer dogs were deployed. The dogs immediately circled back to the road, and the handlers insisted that Jeannie was not lost, but must have been the victim of foul play. Some of the dog handlers believed that the boyfriend was the culprit and must be hiding something. So they took the dogs out there. The dogs circled back to the road. So they're like, no, she couldn't have gotten lost. She wasn't hiking. Mike did something to her and she was the victim of foul play. A huge search and rescue grid search operation continued, the largest in Yosemite's history at that time, involving many hundreds of people over 40 square miles. And these searchers included firefighters, search and rescue teams from all over the Central Valley. The FBI was unusually called in due to the suspicion of foul play, and they did polygraph Mike. The test was negative, and he was dismissed as a potential suspect. I have a beef with this because polygraphs are not always reliable, and I do think it's weird that the FBI was called in. I discussed this on the last episode, I believe. Like, it's just really weird, and just because there was foul play, I'm like, I mean, I don't know. It just has me questioning some things. So they did dismiss Mike as a suspect, although I think they might have jumped the gun a little bit. Now, the search was eventually called off 2 weeks later because there was still no trace of Jeannie or her clothing, like nothing. However, two clear footprints that matched her boots had been found, one near where she was last seen near the car, and the other near one of the most popular hiker trails in Yosemite, which was the Bridalveil to Yosemite Valley Trail. To the searchers, this made no sense, as someone like Jeannie would have walked down this main trail until she found help. So that boot print evidence was dismissed. They're thinking this probably wasn't hers, it was probably someone else's because she would have just kept on the trail and eventually ran into someone that could have helped her if she was lost. Two-thirds of the search focused on the area to the left of where Jeannie's presumed direction of travel was. So, as a person usually walks in a circle of about 1 square mile, always turning towards the dominant side. So, they were saying this is likely where she went, just of what we know, not about her, but about where how people get lost outside. And so they focused on this specific area, but they still didn't find anything except that one boot print by the car. 1 month later, a woman named Maureen McConnell, the friend of Jeannie's roommate, Vicky Fortino, she called a prominent tracker school run by a renowned tracker named Tom Brown Jr., and she asked if they would help given the lack of success from the formal investigation. So this was after the search by the National Park Service had been called off. And her friends and family are desperate for answers and to find out what happened to her. Her friends and family, they actually held little hope that she was still alive, but they did want to learn what happened. The tracker school case was referred to a tracker student in California. The student called Vicky, who was the roommate, and interviewed her for several hours asking about Jeannie's outdoor experiences, habits, personality, etc. He spoke with several other people associated with the case, such as the ranger in charge, the federal agent and park investigators, and the person responsible for coordinating the search and rescue. And from all these sources, this tracker student began to form a profile of Jeannie being a missing person. And this is what the profile he made said. The profile was of a self assured businesswoman who was headstrong and confident, if not stubborn, but who knew little about the woods. Yet it was more than just a profile. This was an attempt to get inside the head of a lost person, in effect, to become her. Like, what would she have done? Where would she have gone? What decisions would she have made if she were lost in the wilderness by herself? The student called a fellow tracker student who lived nearer to Yosemite and asked him to help out with this case. So we've got two student trackers on this case. This student checked the area near the disappearance and he didn't find any sign of Jeannie either, just lots of signs from the searchers. But he did notice that the area consisted of stands of aspen trees. And it occurred to him that when the wind blew through the leaves, the resulting noise closely resembled that of a car driving down a paved road. So, if you know where I'm going with this, if one were to search for a road by walking towards the noise, she would have been walking away from the true road. If she were lost and heard what she thought were cars, it might have actually been these trees. This Oh, sorry, that's my phone. This was the key to the two students piecing together what had happened. They now believed that Jeannie had got turned around and simply kept walking towards the sound she thought were cars on the road ahead of her. The first tracker student obtained the search report data. He sat down at his desk and he plotted literally everything on a topographical map. He plotted ground search grids, dog searches, air searches, and the two clear footprints and the aspen forest. Starting at the point that she was last seen, he drew a 1 mile radius arc on the top of on the topo map in the direction of Jeannie's dominance. Now, how did he know her dominance? From the interviews, he was fairly sure that she would be right dominant, when earlier people did the left. The arc crossed the Bridalveil Trail in the vicinity of the footprint. So he's thinking, oh my God, they thought this footprint couldn't have been hers, but it probably was. So why didn't she use the trail? If this was Jeannie's footprint, he's got to figure out what happened. And at this point, if she were lost, she would have been in such profound shock as to not even realize that she had crossed the trail. A lost person typically goes into shock as they become aware of their situation. It causes them to do irrational things, such as drop canteens of water or remove coats in cold weather, and that's paradoxical undressing. The tracker student surmised that once Jeannie was across the trail into the Bridal Veil watershed, it would have been dusk, and she would have been kind of freaking out much more. She would have been catching glimpses of lights on the floor of Yosemite Valley, and he thought she then would have resolved to get herself out of the mess by making a beeline for those lights. So she's lost. It's getting dark. She sees lights in the valley and she's going to try and go there. So, to get to those lights, she would begin to descend some very rough terrain. So, from the maps, he realized that she would have come to Bridalveil Creek, which was dangerously high because of snowmelt runoff for this time of year. And because she was not backwoods savvy, she would not know to attempt a crossing like this would be basically a suicide mission. It would not have been safe at all. And no matter where she chose to cross, she would undoubtedly slip on the wet, polished granite, probably hit her head, and drown unconscious in the cold water. And not to mention, since it's snowmelt, that's also going to shock your body a lot. Even if you don't hit your head, your body goes into shock when that happens. She might have sensed the danger, but the combination of shock and fear coupled with her stubbornness would have pushed her onward towards those lights. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm doing the damn thing. I'm getting myself out of this mess. I'm lost. I have to keep going towards the lights. The tracker student followed the course of the creek as shown on the topo map and chose a likely spot for her to have attempted the crossing. Now, he called the authorities and gave them coordinates where they would likely find her body. This was pure landscape tracking done while seated at a desk, and the student's suggestion was met with great skepticism. People were like, "You haven't been out here, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not boots on the ground. Like, why are we gonna follow up on this lead when you have no idea what you're talking about? There's no way she would have been there." He's basically saying everything opposite of the original search, and he's saying, "Hey, that boot print that you found on this trail was hers. She is down here, you guys need to look." So the investigators believed that there is no way Jeannie would have attempted to enter that area as the terrain was extremely rugged. He assumed that the tracker student has simply chosen one area in the entire region grid that wasn't searched and said, "Check here." But the student assured the authorities that he and his tracker friend would personally find the body the following weekend. On September 3rd, 1995, so about 2 months after Jeannie went missing, two fishermen, Mike Yolowski and his friend, finally found Jeannie's body in a small pool in the river within a quarter mile of the tracker student's estimation. And the location of her body also was at the correct elevation that the tracker student said it would be at. They were fishing 3/4 of a mile above Bridalveil Falls, around 3 miles from where Jeannie disappeared. The National Park Service was called and a helicopter picked up her body the next day. It was in a really bad state of decomposition as it had been in the water for several weeks, and the identification was possible only through dental records. Mike said that the area is really inaccessible to anyone other than rock and mountain climbers. It's really rugged. Park spokesperson Bob Clopine said, "The woman apparently was walking in a rugged area of the park where there are no trails and the creekside rocks are especially slippery. The creek was rushing faster than in other years because of the huge snowpack melt." Another park spokesperson said that investigators did not believe that the body could have been carried to that spot by rushing waters because the creek is fairly choked with debris. The authorities did not have a theory, however, as to how her body got to where it was. So they're saying we have no idea. Which is funny because the two tracker students said, "Hey, this is where she's going to be. This is what happened. We've gone through this. We know what we're talking about." And she was found very close to where they said she'd be found and at the same elevation. Now, the two students from the tracker school never received anything but a thank you from the roommate, and the lead investigator believed it was just luck. So the lead investigator that was looking for Jeannie said, these stupid students, they don't know what they're talking about. They just were lucky. And that pisses me off so much because like what? It just like, I think in this situation, the lead investigator, if he were a smart person and a kind person, he would have said, "I'm really sorry I didn't listen to you. You were right. Thank you so much for your help." But instead, he just said, "Oh, they just got lucky." So there are still many questions about Jeannie's disappearance and death. Mine question, was Mike involved, like the boyfriend? And why I mean, like, how did this even happen? Why didn't the dogs pick up her scent? They had 8 teams of sniffer dogs, and they all came back to the road. So why didn't they pick up her scent and take the searchers to where she was located? I mean, they didn't even have a cause of death either, so I'm like, did she die of exposure? I don't know if that would have been possible because it's not really that cold to where you can't survive for a few days outside, in the woods in Yosemite at this time. It was in July. But I'm also like, how did she die? Did she fall? Did she crack her skull? Like, they didn't mention a cause of death. They didn't mention how long they thought she might have been alive out there if she'd survived for a few days by herself. But my main question is like, why didn't the dogs pick up her scent? There was no bad weather. It was good weather for searching. It wasn't like in a lot of the cases we talk about where they go missing, then there's like a snowstorm or a rainstorm. Actually, this was like ideal conditions for searching, minus the super high rushing creek. But they didn't even look where I feel like they should have and could have looked. And this might have ended so much differently. Now, I did see a theory like, was she abducted from the parking area and later dumped? I don't think that theory holds any water because of how rugged the terrain was. So I have a lot of questions, and they basically closed that case. They found her, and I really wish there were more of an investigation into what happened, her cause of death, because to me, some of the pieces just don't fit together. I think it definitely was an accident, but this one single case, along with others, but specifically this one is like, well, shit, if I actually got lost in the woods, like, the National Park Service wouldn't even be able to find me. There's just maybe some, like, amateur tracker students would be able to find me, and that's like, I think it's great that they have those skills, the tracker students, and that they tried to help, but it doesn't give me a lot of hope or respect for some of the national park service, like, systems, because what do you mean she was not very far away, she's only 3 miles away and you couldn't find her? I mean, that is kind of ridiculous in my opinion. Jeannie's story is one of those cases that sits right on the edge between explanation and uncertainty, and on paper, there are always answers, like, her remains were found, And the investigators have suggested that she fell, but we don't really know because even with that conclusion, her case doesn't feel settled to me. She disappeared in broad daylight, just minutes after stepping away from her car. Search dogs didn't pick up her scent. Footprints appeared in places that don't really make sense. And despite one of the largest search efforts in Yosemite National Park history at that time, she isn't found until months later in a location that raised more questions than answers. Was it simply a tragic accident in an unforgiving terrain? Did she become disoriented and wander off the trail? Or is there something about those missing hours that we'll never really know or understand? What makes Jeannie's case so haunting isn't how it ended, but how quickly everything went wrong. One moment, she was on a casual roadside stop at this beautiful overlook, and the next, she's vanished into one of the most visited national parks in the world. And it's a reminder that the wilderness doesn't need to be remote or extreme to be dangerous. Even well traveled areas can turn disorienting in seconds, especially without supplies, a plan, or someone keeping you within sight. So, if there's anything to take away from Jeannie's story, it's this: stay together, tell someone your plans, carry the basics, even on short stops, because sometimes it only takes a few minutes off trail for a simple outing to become something much more serious. And for Jeannie, those few minutes became a mystery that even today still lingers in the shadows of Yosemite. As always, recreate responsibly and remember, sometimes the great outdoors aren't always great. Thanks for listening to Morbid Outdoors. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. It's free, easy, and it helps us out immensely. When you subscribe, you get updates on our latest episodes, and it also boosts our visibility, making it easier for other curious souls to find us. Another great way to support Morbid Outdoors is by leaving us a review. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, a quick review helps us know what you love about the show. You can also join us on Patreon for early and ad free content. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Morbid Outdoors Podcast. You can email us case suggestions and your campfire stories at morbidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you next time. Hello, everyone. I think months ago I said I was gonna like add personal things at the end because some of you like the personal things up front and some of you don't, but I don't, I can't please everyone. So I'm just gonna put the random stuff on the tail end and the important stuff at the beginning. Yeah, this case really gets to me because it's just so bizarre. It's not one of those cases where it's like, "Oh my gosh, this is so mysterious." It's just one of those cases like, "What happened? Like, why didn't the dogs pick up the scent? Like, why was the FBI called in?" Like, I just think it's crazy, and what makes me pissed is that those student trackers did so much work, so much boots on the ground with contacting her roommates and interviewing people and getting in her mind, like, what the decision she would have made, and she did make, obviously. And that to me is so impressive and deserves so much more recognition than what they got. I couldn't even find their names. I couldn't even find their names online. And they only were referred to in the sources that I saw as the tracker students. And I'm like, that's so fucked up. It's so fucked up because if someone, I don't know, I just have a lot to say about that, but I just think it's really messed up that those two students did not get the recognition and the praise that they deserved, and I really hope that if there's still, like, trackers today, those are the people that I would want to find me. Like, screw the National Park Service. They can they cannot manage, like, a search. Get me these tracker students, Like, I'm sure they're excellent at their jobs if they're still doing tracking stuff, and honestly, that is so, so cool to me that they could just get inside the decision she would have made by learning about who she was as a person. And that is honestly like so cool to me. So kudos to them. They are definitely heroes in the story, even though they didn't get the recognition that they deserve. Um, I'm just on here and just saying thank you for listening, and I'm still weighing, like, what the future of Morbid Outdoors looks like. I really do enjoy doing the show. It's just there are so many things going on in my life, and, it's hard to keep up, like, this hobby, this, like I'll say it's a hobby. This hobby because it takes time and energy and effort, as does everything in life, but I just need to better learn how to say no to things or to put my energy into other things that are maybe more important in my life and my family. I don't know. This is important to me too, but it's just time and energy away from other things and projects. So I really really appreciate you listening. I cannot wait to share about my summer. I've got some backpacking trips scheduled. And yeah, I'm just like so excited because it's going to be a great summer. And if you want to follow along my travels and adventures, there's a link in the show notes to follow my personal Instagram. And I hope that you guys have a great weekend. So enjoy yourselves. And if you work in the public schools like I do, we are so close. We can make it. All right, guys, I'll see you guys next week. Bye.